Now brings me to the transition issues and the transition arrangements that we have made. First and foremost, I want to thank those organizations, those lessees that have been working well with you and that have tried to live to the obligation that you have said. You have mentioned, for example, Sony, that you thought was acting reasonable. And that is what I would also like to appeal to the others to do. It is inhuman. It is inhuman for you to reduce the salary of a worker, by over 50%. Even though you have gone private, even though you have become a private company, you are still in Kenya. You did not become a private company by leasing and then go to heaven and work from there, or you go across the Indian Ocean. You are still working in Kenya. And in Kenya, there are certain laws and there are certain obligations that we have to our workers and to our people. And reducing salaries is not one of them. So I want to thank those companies, Sony and the others, who have agreed to follow up to the obligations that we agreed in the transition clause. And I want also to appeal to those ones who have not to desist from the notion that because it is a private company, then you can mistreat workers. That does not work. And we are not going to accept that. Even though you are private, you are still obligated to follow laws in Kenya, and you are still obligated to treat people humanely. That is not all. In relation to the unions, it is in their interest. It is in the interest of the companies to have organizations that can represent the workers and deal with the workers. Otherwise, they have to deal with one worker at a time. And there is a reason why unions were formed in the first place. There is a reason why unions exist, not just in Kenya, but globally. There is a reason. And the reason sometimes is beneficial to the companies themselves. So they should not see the unions as enemies. They should see the unions as the partners that they need in order to meet difficult circumstances, particularly in challenging situations such as the ones that we have. And I must say that in spite of the fact that there is a strike, the unions have been fairly reasonable in their obligations. I wish also to acknowledge is that we did have an agreement. And as a government, we did have obligations that we committed ourselves to. And I want to acknowledge that we have not lived up to those expectations. And for that, I personally apologize. Because once you commit yourself to something, then it is only right that you do so. However, we have not done it, but it is not out of bad will that we have not done it. It is out of circumstances within the country. The country has certain challenges related to availability of funds and availability of money and fiscal space that exists in the country. That's why that obligation has not been met. But the fact that we have got those challenges does not diminish the pain, to the people who are feeling it. And I want to say that we regret the fact that we have not met the obligations that we are supposed to have met as a government. The debts and obligations that we have are not owed by those companies. All right? The debts, the 10.8 or the other, whatever we determine as a debt, over and above the agreement that we had and the obligations that they had, which we are going to speak about separately, the debts are not their debts. These debts are our debts as a government. Okay, they are our debts. We are the ones who owe these workers money, not the companies. Ourselves, we are the ones who owe as a government. So these companies do not owe the workers money. We, the government, owe the workers the money. We owe them the 10.8 and any other obligations that we have in accordance with our agreement. is to say that at a personal level, I feel for the workers who are suffering. I feel for them. And as a government, we should not be a hindrance or a handicap. And that's what it translates to. It's not, they are not just figures in the air. These are practical things at homes. And therefore, as a human being, as an individual, I acknowledge that on that part we have failed those people. So let's not beat around the bush on that particular issue. Lessees, let's be clear about one thing. These companies are not government companies anymore. Let's just be clear here. These companies are leased they are leased out to private companies, which means that they are private companies. Let's not beat around the bush on this one. So, to that extent, these are not government companies. They are government-owned premises, but they are not government companies. These are private companies. Any form of property destruction. And to ask you to, as I appeal for adherence to the law with the lessees and other obligations that exist, that we have signed and agreed in the framework of existing law. If we abuse the law and we say that such obligations are acceptable, that behavior in destruction of property is acceptable, then what we would essentially be saying is that we do not recognize the law. If we do not recognize the law, then it will mean that we don't even recognize the basis on which we have, the foundation on which we have agreed ourselves. Because that is the law. We have agreed on law. I'm here sitting with you because I am obligated by the law, to sit here. So we must make sure that we balance on both sides, that destruction of property is not acceptable at all. At all. And we must also ask security apparatus, the security apparatus, IG Kanja and the rest of security apparatus, that people who are destroying property, people who are stopping others from carrying out their responsibilities, they must also face the law and they must be arrested and prosecuted. That is not acceptable. What our Constitution guarantees, and that is peaceful assembly, peaceful demonstration, that has never been stopped by anybody. But we cannot at the same time accept that people can destroy property. Following that arrangement and following that understanding, striking against the companies themselves does not help, because you are striking against a third party. So the companies themselves, as it were, in relation to the obligations of the money that is owed, the workers themselves have no obligation of any kind. I mean, the companies, the lessees, have no obligation of any kind, and they will not help, and they are not involved. Okay, so let's get that thing very clear. What does that all mean? What it means is that the engagement of the money must be ourselves and yourselves, must be the unions, the workers, and ourselves, which brings in workers' representatives, especially Parliament, especially our members of Parliament, because this money that we are going to pay, this 10.8 billion that we are going to pay, is money that has got to be approved by our Parliament. We ourselves as a ministry are pushing very hard for this money to be cleared. In fact, for me, as a CS in agriculture, what I would prefer is, instead of waiting the periods that we have said, for me, I would even prefer to finish with it as quickly as possible. And the only way I can do it is if I get parliamentary support, so that they put it in the budget and Treasury releases the money. So I am appealing to Parliament to ensure that in the supplementary budget, This money that we are pushing for, this money for the workers, they make sure that that money is in the budget so that we can be able to meet these obligations without necessarily waiting for a long period in order for us to be able to clear. The better. In fact, I wish they would just get that bulk money, we clear this issue so that we can rest the matter. That would be my appeal, because that way we stabilize the sugar sector once and for all. Okay, so that is the gist of the relationship and the clarity of the matter as I see it.
We have met with the union of the sugar sector in trying to come up with a way forward on how to address the current stalemate in the sugar sector, which is to do with the sugar worker strike, which over the last I think 1 week we witnessed some concern in the sector, especially on the payment of their dues. So we are happy as a ministry. We have sat down here, we have consulted, and so far we have agreed on some measures to be taken so that we can bring normalcy on the sector. And what's important is for the workers to return back to work. We have discussed a number of issues. One of them is payment of their salaries, their dues, which we have agreed that within the next 2 weeks their salaries will be paid. The salary arrears will be paid. We have also discussed about issues to do with the union deduction, which the Ministry of Labour will guide going forward. We have formed a small team to discuss with it. We have also discussed issues to do with the working environment in terms of the employees who have been victimized during the strike, and we have agreed with the union on the model to adopt, that there should be no victimization of the employees, and the union and the ministry will work with the private company to see that there is normalcy and there is order, and the employees feel comfortable in their work environment. We have also discussed issues with the sharp salary reduction of their salaries, and we have developed a mechanism of meeting with the private sector, the lessee, so that we can see how best that can be agreed upon. We are also happy as government that the sector has picked, despite these issues of delay in payment of salary arrears, which I think the government has put up now in the budget, and we want to clear their salary arrears. At the same time, their dues as agreed in the earlier agreement. We also witnessed that there are some few destruction in the sugar sector. There are some arsonists who have taken advantage of the strike to destroy some of the sugar plantation, and we want to give them notice that during this period we don't expect such behaviors to occur, especially destruction of people's livelihood and also destruction of the plantation, because that is the main raw material for the factories and also the livelihood when it comes to workers. So I want to urge all the workers to refrain from such habit, and we have also discussed with the security forces to take full charge of the plantation and make sure that they provide necessary security for the factories, for the workers, and also for the commodities, in this case the sugarcane, which are now in the farms. Otherwise, the government will continue improving this sector so that, as promised by this government, within the next, by 2027, we expect to have net exporter of sugar, because so far the sugar sector is shaped up. The farmers are now being paid every week, and the prices, we have also made sure that the prices for the cane are at a very competitive prices. We are now paying them over 5,500 per ton. And we know that within the next few years, this sector will be a sector which will be driving this economy in a very positive and impactful manner.
We know that conditions that prevailed as to call a strike have been addressed, and we are continuing to address, because the ministry has allowed us to continue engaging, either directly or through the transition committee. We want to appreciate the initiatives we have taken, more so Sugar Board to take up initiatives that are very sensitive to the workers, as we have indicated to them. The payment of the arrears, which is coming within the next 2 weeks, we appreciate that. And we want to just indicate that since we are now engaging and talking, we'll ask our workers to go back to work so that they allow us to continue engaging as we finalize this discussion. So we wish that to state that the strike has been called off as we continue engaging to discuss on matters that affect them directly.